Listen to the people. Listen to humanity. Listen to the parrot. Parrot TV. Parrot TV. Parrot TV. Parrot TV. Parrot TV.
Do you know that there is a publishing company that wants to make life easier for you as a writer? This publishing company is called World Inkers Printing and Publishing. We publish in all different languages, and we're looking for writers of all genres, all formats. We're looking for scholars, ghostwriters, playwrights, poets, short fiction, novelists, you name it. We're looking for anybody who is interested in writing and the craft of writing to be in touch with us. You can reach us at info.worldinkers@gmail.com. With World Inkers Printing and Publishing, you do not require a lot of money to publish with us. Contact us today at info.worldinkers@gmail.com. Become a winner with other authors at World Inkers Printing and Publishing. Give us a shot. We will surely finish you. Hello, welcome to World Inkers Network. I'm Dustin Pickering, your noble and honest host. It's 10 a.m. I know you guys out there watching are up early on a Saturday. We have Carlo Parcelli today. And if you have not subscribed to the channel, I advise you to do so now. It will be wonderful to have you as a subscriber. So Carlo Parcelli is also our co-host on the Foreign Policy Review. He has just released Terrare. It's a poetry collection. So we're going to discuss this a little bit in detail about the genesis of Terrare and the process of writing it. So thanks for joining us today, Carlo. How are you today?
Hanging in there. I'm okay.
That's wonderful. It's good to see you on the World Inkers Network again. So we know you from Foreign Policy Review, so we get to know you a little more as a poet and a writer today. So tell us a little bit about who Terrare is and where you discovered this figure of historical importance, and why did you find the need to write about him?
Well, first of all, he's the title poem in this book, which is that I've just published through the National International Beat Poetry Foundation. It's their first imprint. They're planning on doing, well, she's got many works in many volumes in the works. But the Terrare is a title poem. There's they're dramatic monologues. There's 23 of them. Terrare, each monologue is through the voice of a particular individual. They're structured in after David Jones's monologue poems that appear in Sleeping Lord. He's using the voice of a Roman Principalis, which is a Roman centurion, probably at the level of something like a staff sergeant, and so I was intrigued with that for reasons I won't go into right now, and I figured I'd like to write in that voice, which I did. And now this is my fourth book of essentially dramatic monologues. Terrare intrigued me because because of who he was, and the time in which he existed. He was a late 18th century, early 19th century figure in France. The thing about him was he was a medical anomaly. Like no one in existence has ever matched Terrare in his particular malignancy, I guess you would call it. He had an insatiable appetite, and his body was deformed to accommodate that appetite. Apparently, his mouth was wider than one would expect. His lower jaw, apparently opened to accommodate huge amounts of food. And when doctors looked down his gullet, it was just simply, he was all stomach, and terribly ulcerated stomach, because he would eat anything. He would eat wet hay. He would eat dead animals that he found on the road. he would eat garbage. But he would also eat huge amounts of food. So obviously, he was a contestant. He was ripe to end up in a carnival. So the speaker of this poem is a carny barker. Now, obviously, I've taken great liberties because the poem goes on for 700 lines. So a carny barker that's barking 700 lines is going to probably lose his audience. But it was to explore what it meant to have these deformities in the Enlightenment, in the French Enlightenment, the period in which there was this kind of enormous change going on, and the way that a person, an individual like Tarrare would fit into that. So there's a lot of kind of, I don't want to call them just cheeky, I think they're more profound than that, but comparisons between Napoleon, between a manufacturing industry that's growing up, the Industrial Revolution that's coming up in France at the time, and metaphorically relating back to the appetites of Tarrare, which are horrendous. I mean, and for him, just terrible. He was even accused of eating a baby in Lyon. So, and which is mentioned in the monologue. But briefly, I don't want, you don't want to, you don't want to go. I didn't want to go for the sensational exclusively, but anything about Tarrare that you could mention in his biography was sensational in a kind of sad and tragic way. He died when he was 26, and it was surprising to live that long. So that's pretty it.
This is very interesting. So where did you discover this figure? Or where did you first hear, and why did you take interest?
Oh wow! Well, because I'm always going back to the Enlightenment. I'm very anti-Enlightenment. I was, prior to my discovery of Max Horkheimer's Eclipse of Reason and Horkheimer and Adorno's A Dialectic of Enlightenment, but those were very influential books, and I see Enlightenment science as being the reason we're in this climate change, nuclear annihilation stage, because there was a great that acceleration around Leibniz and Newton and all those people at the time, all the scientists at the time involved in the development of and the acceleration of science and the mathematization and quantification of science have brought us to this point. I mean, it's obvious that their expression of being exceptional has a very negative side. I mean, you don't want to get into that whole transformation, but obviously we're at a point now. We're at the point now with global climate change and nuclear annihilation that was prompted by Enlightenment science. All the developments around, like Newton and Leibniz being at the center of it because of basically the calculus. So that was a subject for my first 35 years of working on poetry.
So a lot of involvement in the topics and the subject matter. I noticed you mentioned the deformity of Tarrare, and you also in the poem that you have that deals with Alexander Pope, you mentioned you focus on his deformities as well. Is there just like a fascination with deformity in your poetry, or would you say that's like a specific topic in this particular book? Or
no, it's just coincidental, and I think those are the only two that deal with deformity. No, I'm looking more for the occasion, and Tarrare is obvious an occasion. I will tell you, Tarrare was not the first the first monologue I worked on that appears in this book. It's probably right in the middle. And in a previous publication, the title poem is Isaac Newton Scalder Prophesies the End of the World. And in that, it's in the voice of Newton Scalder, who was a yeoman on Newton's estate at Woolsthorpe. and he's pointing out that he can see sort of this danger in what Newton is doing, and plus there's a lot of discussion of class in that, and it ends with the line that essentially Newton with light throws dirt upon our eyes, which is a very complex metaphor. So Newton was, in one of the things he was, and many things he was involved in, of course, was the study of light. Him and Christian Huygens and all these major people, and even his bête noire, Robert Hooke. But so you got this light, but with that light you get this nuclear light, which is like death, throwing dirt on dead bodies, burying us. So that's and it culminates in that line. I mean, for the Scalder in the earlier book, he even envisions in a dream what are the steam towers for nuclear power plants, and he thinks they're big kettles for boiling eels for the army, but in his dream. But that's not.
Oh, that's interesting.
But so with Terrer, that's really just in the middle, and I just look for the occasion. And with the Pope Swift poem, where the lady, I can't remember her name offhand, but
once again,
yes, what basically happens for the audience is that Alexander Pope, who has a spina bifida, a curvature of the spine, and was only 4'6". He fell in love with this woman. She was married, and she's apparently very beautiful. And so he expressed his love for her and asked her to run away with him. But she laughed in his face. And that just completely humiliated him. Obviously, for anyone, that would be a terrible humiliation. And Pope being a great poet, I can't imagine. But so Swift with his friend, and the poem is in the voice of Swift, and he's trying to console in Swift's own way Pope and his bony bosom, as Swift phrases it once in the poem. So he tries to console him, and that's the drift of that poem, which is really kind of opposite of the other. And I like the last line in that one too, where Swift just says, "But realize, Alexander, that I do love thee." And that's and they did have that kind of warm relationship.
So, and I'm also curious about the Peter Doyle poem that's sort of exposing some of Walt Whitman and his time periods faux pas, and his thoughts. So, when did you come upon some of Whitman's weaknesses as a poet, and why did you think to express that in this form of this poem?
Well, I had read about them in a number of really almost privately printed biographies of Whitman. I read about his pedophilia on Long Island, and I had read about his being tarred and feathered and driven out by the people there. I read about, I read that I took a course in Whitman when I was an undergraduate, a Whitman Twain class, and the professor was Dr. Barnes, and he loved Twain, but he did not like Whitman, and he would march up and down the. He smoked a big stogie. He actually kind of looked a little like Twain. Smoked a big stogie and walk up and down the aisles. And he was reading. We were reading this Whitman poem, and it was like about this woman was like she could chop down a tree, and I can't remember which one it was. I thought it was Song of the Broad Axe, but I recently reread that. And it wasn't in there, so my mind is playing tricks on me. But and she was doing driving rails, the nails into the railroad and all this. And he's walking up down the aisle and he's reciting this because he's got it by heart. And he pulls a stogie out of his mouth and he goes, "Hey, Whitman's not talking about a woman here. He's talking about a man, in his kind of gravelly voice, and
Mhm.
and that stuck with me because
Mhm.
this homosexuality, the Calamus poems, there obviously Whitman was homosexual. Okay,
Mhm.
we got to that point. These other factors, Whitman did not. He believed in abolition, but he did not believe that African Americans were intelligent enough to have a franchise, that they should be allowed to vote. He did not believe that. And other faults.
Mhm.
But the major theme of that poem is much more complex, and I don't even know if I could express it outside of the poem. But it's that Peter Doyle, his major lover in his
Mhm.
life, his major lover, could not express his homosexuality in a society that Whitman was idealizing and lionizing, and that
Mhm.
got to Doyle. So at one point in Doyle's life, and it's been lost unfortunately, he wrote a suicide letter, which is the title of the poem, in the title of the poem, to Walt Whitman and his landlady. He was close to Whitman's landlady. He was going to kill himself. He couldn't take it anymore. And Whitman, of course, wrote a short uh, letter back to him. Uh, a letter back to him, don't do it, don't do it. And Doyle didn't do it. Doyle's family was well aware he was homosexual, but but by the same token, it was, here's Whitman praising this culture, and I've always said that that's bullshit. His vision of America is one of the largest piece of bullshit I've ever encountered. That's not what was going on. He was in New Jersey, had access to New York, or even occasionally lived in New York during some of the greatest depressions and recessions. People living on the street all over the place with no place to stay in the history of this fucking country. It's it, it was it's just, his vision is bullshit. There's other things. There's always this talk about how he helped people in the hospital during the Civil War. He would go visit the wounded soldiers.
Mhm.
Well, and he talks about kissing wounded soldiers and stuff like that on the lips passionately. But to tell you the truth, there is a disease. Not it's a it's a it's a psychological disease where people, I don't know if it's a disease, maybe, what do you call it? But anyway,
Mhm.
people get off on deformities, and
Mhm.
that seems to be very much present in Whitman in a much of his writing. So that he would go to visit amputees because those amputees were a sexual um, trigger for him. And then you have, I think it's in the Cradle Endlessly Rocky. It might be in the door. Might be in the door where the lilacs bloom. I can't put the title offhand because I'm going at lightning speed here in my head. But
Mhm.
he gets really cheeky with the public because he talks about fucking Lincoln after Lincoln's been assassinated, and he uses this kind of veiled sexual imagery, the black dot in the white field. I don't know if it's, but anyway, the black
Mhm.
dot being the asshole. So he's talking about Lincoln's fucking Lincoln in the ass, and he just puts it right by the American public. Ah, you stupid fuckers! I'm gonna, run it. So anyway, Doyle, he's not built like that. He is not built like that, and it's driving his homosexuality and his having to veil it because at that time, even though there were different, men often slept together in the same beds and that sort of thing. Even though the
Mhm.
more different, somewhat different and unique for the time, homosexuality was frowned on,
Yeah.
and and Whitman was warned many times by Emerson and other people that the Calamus poems, for example, went too far, and one of his publishers refused to publish Leaves of
Mhm.
Grass because of the Calamus. So, but by the same token, he didn't take that. Look, you're denying Whitman. you're denying my sexuality. Fuck you. You're not all that. He insisted on going, oh, you're denying my, well, I'll just make you out to be this great ideal because I want to be famous. And I know if I kick against the pricks, number one, I'll never get any fame. Number two, you might hang me. So I did it from Peter Doyle's point of view after I read Reynolds' book. I can't remember. I think his first name is James Reynolds. He wrote a brilliant book on Whitman, and I probably should have prepared better, but I can't remember the title of it right now. I'm pretty sure his name is James Reynolds, where he brought all that back to me. He discussed all of that in detail, and I said, oh, shoot, I got to get this off my chest. Here's a scholar who's done all the research. I've read all these off the main, privately printed things, and because I'm in the book business, I was running across all this stuff because that's why I earned a living. And let's just air this out and see where it goes. And it turned out to be one of the best monologues in the volume I have here.
Very interesting. Yeah, it's very fascinating. We're going to take a brief break, but we'll be right back with some of Carlo's poetry. Thanks for watching the World Inkers Network. America Open Market, AO Market. The best digital market for humanity is a free, multilingual, borderless market open to international sellers with various languages included. With America Open Market, you may start selling in minutes after filling out the form. Comprehensive dashboard where you understand your sales, orders, and customers is available. You get paid directly, securely, and instantly on the America Open Market. You can sell your house, car, electronic laptop, CD player, boombox, phone, headphones, furniture, and clothing, and anything on AmericaOpenMarket.com where all your sales and customer needs are met. Register as a merchant today. You will not regret becoming a vendor at America Open Market. For further inquiries, contact us at aomarket@gmail.com. AO Market, best digital marketplace for humanity. World Inkers Monthly Magazine is a fine source for your literary interests. It's an all-source magazine with poetry, prose, and essays and articles, as well as interviews. It's all full-color art and photography from a variety of voices and artists. You will find this magazine entertaining. This is an all-purpose readership, and we are looking for new voices. This sleek, full-color edition of World Inkers Monthly Magazine will be something pleasant for your eyes as well as for your mind. And we're looking for authors for one book promotion in the magazine. If you're a business, we want to promote your business. You may submit your book reviews, your academic or non-academic articles on the humanities and the arts, as well as your literary writing and creative output to publication.worldinkers@gmail.com. World Inkers Monthly Magazine does not spare any ink. Keep inking for World Inkers Monthly Magazine. Welcome back to today's show, World Inkers Network, and I'm Dustin Pickering. If you have not subscribed, please do to our channel at YouTube. And we have Carlo Parcelli today. He's going to share his poetry. So, Carlo, without further ado, go right ahead and start reading for us. Thanks.
Okay. I do want to point out that this is the book I'm going to be reading from. It's the least price the publisher allowed me to put it at was $15. They gave me 3 choices. I picked 15. It's 262 pages long, so it's a kind of a lot of bang for your buck. It's 23 of these dramatic monologues. We discussed Peter Doyle's suicide letter to Walt Whitman, and we talked about Elis Terrer and Jonathan Swift's letter to his friend Alexander Pope upon Lady Montague's rejection of the latter's protestations of love. But the one I'd like to actually two. I'm just going to read brief sections, just the openings, because they're all much longer than I can read here. But the third, what, the fourth one in the book. It's called London Bridge, and it's actually in the voice of Bill Shakespeare. Um, and it talks about a certain incident. Shakespeare was he was rehearsing Richard III to perform before Elizabeth, the court, and at that point, several of his supporters, his finance backers, that's the word I'm looking for, were plotted a kind of a coup against Elizabeth, and of course they found their heads on pikes at the entrance of London Bridge. And of course, if you look at a map of London at the time, where Shakespeare had his house and his theater was on one side of London Bridge, I think the west side, and he would have to cross London Bridge to go to the palace. And so he would have to, every day for these rehearsals, he would have to pass under the severed heads on pikes of his financial supporters, his literal backers. And also, already Elizabeth was a little suspicious of Shakespeare's loyalties. So I'm just going to read the first, I don't know, 60 lines or so of this. It's just simply called London Bridge, and this is Shakespeare speaking, so you can see how cheeky I can get. Okay. Were that a cock thrice crowed, with the heads of Danvers and blount on pikes in Essex, mouldering pate between, a grisly purgation upon London Bridge, what keens me not for my morning sojourn before the Queen, but to most content myself to but prate upon a stage that inspires not a scaffold to append her rage. I behind an ashen mask abide, as I pass through Southgate, and hide my true and broken spirit, as though these murders be no affair of mine. As man be cipher unto himself, a mask to temper a seditious lope, lest the author be invited to dance at the end of Her Majesty's ready rope. Did you not hear? She cried. I am Richard. Know ye not that? This a breach by some playhouse prat? Dare I escape past hope? Such libel does she from my meaning glean. To bow, yes, but genuflect before a queen? Poor Essex, the raven's jelly, gone from his deserted eyes. My testament, but furious whistling keen by his emptied globe. The spurious mask that words weave, even upon our most fervent prayers. A layer of counterfeit infamy, that our very howlings despise. Smash against such horrors, such as they are, near break, a poet's fury seek repair, or such I ams be itself the gate of cowards. So are we fit to stand in blood, ankle deep, and drip black ink into it. And I'll just stop there, because it goes on and on. But you can see by the little sample I read that there's also, I read a lot of Shakespeare, and I watch the plays and on TV over and over again, and I'm all these monologues I have attempted to absorb, to my mind, what I hear in Shakespeare. So because the language of Shakespeare so magnificently fits what Pound called the three necessary aspects of poetry: melopeia, phanopia, and logopeia. And I won't go into those. You can look them up if you want, the Pound qualities. But basically, it's music and content. And Shakespeare obviously does that better than anyone else in the English language has ever done it. So, and if I can, I'd like to read just a brief section from another one, to give you some kind of scope of the subject matter. And this one's called The Battle of Brooklyn Heights. And as the other section I read was in the voice of Shakespeare, this is in the voice of a body robber. is one of those guys who would go around after a battle, and when it got dark, it would just simply go around and rob the corpses, or kill or slit the throats of the guys wounded in the field, and then take whatever valuables they had on them. And I'll just read, I guess, just down maybe 25 lines of that, 22 lines. It's called The Battle of Brooklyn Heights. The protagonist is unnamed. And didn't they look the Trinity of Golgotha? This hail fella between me two Confederates, Isaac Sloan and Josiah Potter. What this hail got but one life? Why, I'd gladly give 10 if none be mine. And sure none for God and country, for no student of folly I'd be, as I pinch a plated gold locket from some dead Yankee conscript's pocket. His oozing wounds spoiling me shirt, what I take to be a sign, as the shadows of Hal's brown besses pass over me in the tall grass, like avenging angels upon the Hebrew doors, or Moses moored among the bulrushes. So cozy I'll gaze up their bores and smell the powder and ball, as their bayonets and barrels poke and graze the grasses round, extinguishing any breath they're found. So that's the opening of. So there's a little sample of what you get 62 pages of that.
Very interesting. I think that the story behind the Shakespeare, the poem you read, London Bridge, that's fascinating. Speaking of, the political dimensions of Shakespeare, I mean, from your readings, what do you think? Do you think his alliance would be with the Queen, or would he be against?
Shakespeare's alliance, he was against Queen Elizabeth. I mean,
you think so?
But I think he was, and as my monologue points out, I think his main interest was he just wanted to be a landlord. He wanted to own lots of farmland. He wanted to have a grand house, which he did. Both things he accomplished, and he wanted, because his father was a glove maker and it was not part of the inner circle of the court. He wanted to be. He was a status seeker, probably the greatest poet we've had, easily the greatest poet, I should say, in the language. I know we talked about James Joyce, but for me, it's that they're in a little tiny pantheon. So, but yes, I think he would have. I think he was hostile toward, not hostile, but I think the fact that he wrote Richard III, for example, which is a criticism of Elizabeth. I think that's an indication of where his political sympathies lie. So,
and speaking of Joyce, have you ever considered writing a monologue and something related to Joyce and his life, or would that be something in the future, maybe?
Well, how much future do I have left?
How much future do any of us have left?
I've tried 3 times now to mimic Finnegan's Wake, and the experience is so humiliating.
Yeah, very tricky text.
Yeah, I've given up. I thought that with the advent of the computer and Google, that I used to have to make use of international language dictionaries with dictionaries with 17 or 30 languages to try to find words. And now with the Google, it would seemingly be much easier. But really, when you begin to understand how Finnegan's Wake is put together and why do that, I'm trying to think. I've never
invent the cork. Why not? Didn't invent the cork.
Yeah, right. So I've never. I don't really anticipate doing that. But you can see with the monologues, I look for an instance or a context that will ignite, and just combust, and that's what's
makes for good poetry.
Look around a lot. Like now, I find myself back with Karl Kraus and
Hmm.
his Last Days of Mankind.
Hmm.
Uh, so I'm rereading the Tim's biography, and I was rereading the abridged version. I've ordered to the unabridged, the new unabridged version of the Last Days, and I'm just beginning the research. The way these things come together is I'll start reading, and I'll just and when and I'll riff off the events or the contexts that I find and write little sections, and then juggle them around until they get into a kind of quasi stream of consciousness narrative form,
Hmm.
and and that's the way it goes. But
Interesting.
I haven't done the choice, and I have really no intention of doing them. Uh, what
So we have about 5 minutes left. Would you like to say any final words to fellow poets, writers out there, or people contemplating jumping into the profession?
don't do it
Nah, unless you absolutely have to.
unless you have to, unless you have a vocation. Look,
Yeah.
if unless you can't get up in the morning and not want to work on something every day of your life, every day, and I had to work for till I was in my early 60s, and do the other things that a responsible person would do toward his family and and everybody, his friends, to be there. I've always held down jobs. I'm not one of these dissolute people. But I did that because what time I would have to work, I would work. If my daughter was at play rehearsal, I was sitting on the floor in the hallway reading Kant or Hegel or Byron or the Romantics, who I absolutely loved, adore. So I made every little bit of time I was offered, I made something of it. And then when I was broke, my wife and I opened our own business, and we got financially stable, and then we spent 10 years doing elder care, taking care of our parents, and
Hmm.
and then finally, when I was in my early 60s, I got I found myself like with time on my hands, and but I work every day. For my first volume in this voice, these monologues was called the Canaanite Gospels,
Hmm.
and I work every day and think about it all the time. It's really foremost in my mind. Um, and if you have that drive, if you can't not do it, try it. And it's 99% certain you're going to fail as far as getting a public or anything like that, even
Hmm.
if you do it that way. And
Right. Very tricky business.
I don't
Very.
want to get into it,
Hmm.
but but there's too many people that don't have that vocation that now are in positions of prominence and positions
Hmm.
of authority that
Keepers.
are sort of blocking what the few really talented people I see out there are capable and have found out there capable of doing. And I think that for poetry to have any kind of prominence, that has to end.
Hmm.
People have to step aside unless they have a true vocation. I'm oversimplifying it, but I don't know any other way to put it. The other thing is your 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 poetry should not just be about yourself. Uh, it should be not. It shouldn't be navel gazing. There's a huge world out there. There's tremendous subject matter. I know we've all been through the same experiences, deaths in the family, that sort of thing. Uh, other experiences, personal experiences, but those have been well worn, and I think that it's poets should explore uh, other fields that they're interested in, and express themselves uh, as as regards whatever that it could be, whatever historical context. I really didn't want to get into that because it's really a conversation for another time.
Would you like to share any thank yous or shout outs at the end here?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I would like to thank the Debbie Kildea at the International Beat Poetry Foundation, and Colin Haskins, who used to work with her, for giving me a chance, which is a few years ago, which basically, I mean, pulled me out of total obscurity, because no one would give me the time of day. And I want to tell you, I don't want to sound egotistical here, but the work I do is easily deserving of readings and interviews and publication, as far as I can see within the poetry sphere now. And I want to thank them. And I want to, I've got personal friends like Charles Belbin and Jack Foley, who have been, and this is an East Coast Jack, not West Coast Jack, J.R. Foley, who have supported me all these years, and my wife. So, yeah, I guess that's pretty much says it.
All right. Well, thanks for joining us on the program today, and just pass the word along about World Inkers Network. You watched World Inkers Network. If you missed any of the program, go on and watch it on YouTube. You can subscribe, like, share, and comment on the program on our YouTube as well as our Facebook. And if you'd like to support us financially, you can do that through our PayPal account, paypal.me/nyparrot. That is paypal.me/nyparrot. You'll see that come up in just a bit. And if you have interest in the program and actually being interviewed, you can join us there on the program by getting in touch with me, Dustin Pickering at New York Parrot. You would want to get in touch with me at the email literarycorner@newyorkparrot.com. And that's an interesting way also to reach out if you want to discuss, the program or any of the shows that you see. Here's our support again, paypal.me/nyparrot. If you want to support us with financial backing a little bit, any amount will do with us. We'll be happy to address that on the program and say thank you. Just feel free to donate any amount you feel you can part with for the arts. And we will continue to do this program on Tuesdays at 2 p.m. Central Standard Time, and on Saturdays 10 a.m. Central Standard Time. And just remember that writing is a great thing, and as Carlo said, it's a vocation. If you have the vocation, if you have that itch and it's there with you, just give it a shot. Jump right into it. And it does take a lot of time and effort, I think, and from my experience, to be made into a poet. A lot of experience goes into it, a lot of heartache and a lot of difficulty. And so just be prepared for that if you're going to go into the poetry profession. It's a very tricky thing sometimes. But thanks for watching the program today, and definitely subscribe to our YouTube, and have an excellent, wonderful afternoon as it is approaching here in the United States and in this side of the world. And definitely watch this wonderful video, The Prisoner by Todd Cirillo. Thank you for joining us on the program today, Carlo.
The Prisoner. I can still smell you on my pillowcase, in the comforter and sheets. Thought about doing laundry, but decided to keep you with me just a little while longer. Riding giants. Each new love affair is like standing in front of a 50-foot wave. It looked doable from shore. Gifts. The son of a bitch left me broke and blacked out, with a stripper's name written in black Sharpie on my forearm. 3 bright orange traffic cones in my bedroom, and a 2-day hangover. He is the best friend ever.